The Mummy is directed by Alex Kurtzman and stars Tom Cruise, and is another reboot, remake thing of The Mummy. Yeah, no one really asked for it, and no one really wants it either. Now, to be honest, I actually do really enjoy the 90s Mummy movie with Brendan Fraser in it. I think for the style they were going for, which was a fun, kind of ridiculous, Indiana Jones-esque adventure movie, then yeah, I think they did that really well, and so did its sequel, The Mummy Returns. Unfortunately, this movie is... Now, as most of you know, with my reviews, I usually talk about what worked in the movie first, and then what didn't work in the movie last. With this movie, I can't really do that, because for everything that worked, there's immediately something else that happens in the movie that kind of contradicts exactly what I just said, kind of making both points pointless. But still, I'll try my best anyway. For instance, the best example I can give of this is that the tone of the movie is incredibly inconsistent. There are times where it feels like it's an adventure movie, but there are other times where it feels like a straight-up horror movie. And these two tones are so conflicting and go back and forth so much that it just feels incredibly inconsistent after a while, and it just gets rather annoying, because when you're starting to get used to one style, they then shift tones, and then you have to try and get used to this tone, and then it goes back to the other one, and then back to the other one, and it just doesn't work. That being said though, when they get a style or a tone right, it's done pretty damn well. For example, there is a scene involving a church that leads into a chase scene with an ambulance that I thought was really, really suspenseful and exhilarating and very well executed. But then the next scene along and the scene before that just don't quite kind of match. And this problem is probably due to the amount of writers that are on board this movie, because if I remember rightly, there's about like 3 or 4 different writers, and they've probably all got their own separate visions for how this movie's gonna look. And these styles and tones just don't quite mesh together that well, and instead, rather than coming together, they just kind of collide and become this huge jumbled mess. The acting in the movie, it's fine. It's like the movie, it's okay. The woman in the movie, whose name I cannot remember, she's useless. She is utterly useless. Her character is kind of interesting, but the way she does her performance is just so kind of annoying. Especially the way she acts, because she's basically just there to say to Tom Cruise's character, "Oh, I don't like this. I don't think we should be here. I really don't like this. I think we should go home. I'm not sure about this. Oh, I'm not sure." And it does get really grating after a while. Also, her accent is incredibly inconsistent. I can't tell whether she's giving a British accent or an American accent. It's quite distinct. And then you have Tom Cruise, who's playing Tom Cruise. I mean, what else do I have to say? He's Tom Cruise. He's cool in the movie, but at times he can actually be a dick, which is the one thing I didn't quite get about his character. He's supposed to be the guy you're rooting for. He's the main character, for crying out loud. So if he's a main character, make him as likeable as possible. Don't make him a dick. And what do? They make him a dick in scenes, and it doesn't work because it makes you hate the character. And also, Russell Crowe is in this movie. I'm not going to say what his character is, because it's when it's revealed, it's kind of a surprise. Well, at least I've found it to be a surprise, for worse rather than for good. But yeah, he's fine in the movie. I mean, when certain things happen, I think he goes a bit over the top. And just as a note, Russell Crowe should never, ever do a Cockney accent ever again. It just doesn't work. Sofia Boutella was actually pretty intimidating as the mummy. I mean, she wasn't as scary as, say, the original Boris Karloff version, or the guy who did it in the 90s Mummy movie. But still, I think for what she was going for, I thought her performance was as good as it possibly could have been. And that's pretty good. Now, the story in this movie and the way certain things are executed is where this movie really falls apart for me. Like I mentioned a minute ago, the tone is incredibly inconsistent, but besides that, the story itself doesn't quite work. When it's trying to go for a very... Like, if it stuck to the story it was going for in the first place and just stuck to it, being a very simple adventure horror movie, that would have been fine. But then they try and introduce and set up the universal dark universe, which is apparently a thing now, in this movie to the point where it's pretty obvious they're doing it. Like, there are other movies, for example, Marvel, that do it well because they took several movies to set up the universe. This movie, they're kind of doing a Batman v Superman where they're just trying to set up this universe and cram as much as they can into one movie, and it really doesn't work because it just feels like exposition. Oh, by the way, this thing exists, and it really doesn't work. Also, that being said, besides the fact that the whole setting up the dark universe thing does feel very forced and does get on your nerves a bit, especially at the middle of the movie, the actual plot that's happening in the background does take some very cliched turns that unfortunately didn't work for me. I mean, I get it. This is a mummy movie. I don't expect anything groundbreaking to happen in it. But still, how certain things happen do feel very cliched for this type of movie. And I was just like, oh, seriously, are they doing this again? God's sake. And whilst I'm on that point, some of the action set pieces that happen in this movie, besides, say, the church ambulance scene that I was on about earlier, do feel very somewhat CGI heavy and just feel like they're there for the sake of, you know, oh, the audience is getting uninterested, we better throw an action scene in there. And for the most part, it does kind of work. But you can obviously tell they just had to shove an action scene in there for the sake of, oh shit, we hope the audience doesn't get too bored at this. And my god, this movie just needs to calm the fuck down when it comes to jump scares. I went into this movie expecting a somewhat darker tone to an adventure movie that was similar to the 90s one. Instead, we just get jump scares every 5 fucking minutes. I mean, it's not even funny in this movie. For example, there is a scene near the start of the movie where they've just come back from, you know, the desert place and they've returned back in England. And I kid you not, there are about 3 jump scares in the time span of 10 to 20 seconds. Like, one happens, then you think you're safe, then another one happens, and then, oh god, another one happens. They don't give you enough time to recover from the last 3 fucking jump scares before they throw another one at you, and it just doesn't work. I mean, I'm not a big fan of jump scares in the first place, because if you're going to do them, you have to do them well. You have to build up the tension as much as you possibly can, and then if you're going to, put a jump scare at the end to make that tension feel warranted. Here, it's not even funny. They just shove jump scares wherever they could find them, and it just gets really exhausting. And even by the time the movie's finished, and they occasionally do shove a few more in there, you're just like, oh, for fuck. Honestly, I heard a couple of people in the cinema that I was in when I was watching this movie audibly say, oh, for fuck's sake, not again, when another jump scare happened. That's how often it happens in the movie, and that's how irritating it actually becomes. Like I said, this movie's not great, but it's not awful either. I just think it's okay, but not amazing. And I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. If you want to see it, go and see it. I'm not going to stop you seeing it, but I really do feel this whole dark universe thing could be handled in a much better way if they were just all specifically either adventure movies or horror movies. Don't try and blend both of them together in such a half-assed way. So guys, that was my review of The Mummy. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy the video, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Bye.